Hi, so this is Nick from Green Eyed Records, and I'm with Jim Glennie from James, founder member of James.
Yes, I guess I am.
True.
Yeah, the oldest.
The oldest.
Yeah, from day dot, really. I was at school when I started in the band that kind of morphed into James. Since then I was 15. So, yeah, many moons ago.
So was there a pre-James outfit?
There was a pre-James outfit, but it was. We had a few singers before Tim joined, but even after Tim joined, we weren't called James initially. So we had kind of various different kind of monikers for the band, and then eventually we settled on James, and officially we started, which is 40 years ago. This year, so it's our Ruby anniversary.
40 years.
40 years.
Who'd have thought
I know.
So will there be some unearthing of some early pre-James pre-James material?
I think, thank the Lord, probably not. Hopefully. Yeah, I don't think I've got anything. Have I got anything pre-James? I don't know if I have, to be honest with you. I'm not quite sure what format that'd be on. Probably wax cylinder, probably. Yeah, we were a funny band in those days. Scritchy, scratchy. Very kind of introverted as well. We kind of kept that for quite a while, actually, the introversion. We were very wary of the industry. Scared rather than wary, I'd say. And that made us very insular and really not looking to kind of sell anything or ourselves. Or it was very much like, oh, no, we're just getting a room and make music.
Right.
Scared of the business, scared of success. And everything aspect of it, really. So it just became us in a rehearsal room banging away for 6 hours a day.
So this was sort of the Manchester scene around, would be like early 80s?
Yeah, very early 80s, yeah. Yeah, it would be. I mean, I got into music kind of post-punk. I wasn't into music as a young kid. No, as a family we weren't really. We had Radio 1 on kind of various times during the day. I mean, every now and again my mum would buy a record, but we weren't a big music family. So I didn't really have any big attachment to anything like in that respect. But then I was 15, I got into music massively in a very, very short space of time and started going to gigs. And that would be just after the very end of punk, going into new wave. So it's, it's bands like Joy Division, The Fall, Tear Up Explodes, The Bunnymen, Gang of Four, Talking Heads, all that kind of stuff, Perubu, pop group, all that kind of stuff. And I was just like fascinated.
Yeah.
Absolutely loved it. Went to my first gig and was just like, this is just amazing. I don't understand what the hell's going on, but it's brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And so that was my grounding, our grounding, I suppose, really, early James's grounding. And I like that period in musical history because I think punk kind of broke all the rules and smashed everything up. And new wave was now what we're going to do. And almost like a new style of songwriting appeared after that, but without any rules really, because everything had been smashed up by punk. And I think it was a very interesting time because you could kind of do anything. And there's some great music around.
So who was on? I mean, you mentioned it's interesting. I've not had anybody mention the pop group in 40 years. I remember they had was it She Is Beyond Heaven and Hell single came out. Who was?
How Much Longer Will We Tolerate Mass Murder? That album, that just brilliant. I mean, so political.
Who was particularly sparked your creative imagination from bands and artists around that time?
I suppose me, The Fall and Joy Division. I loved The Fall. There was something about The Fall I loved that was it's almost like pop music from another planet. It was like somehow like messed up and chewed up and gnarly Mark Smith lyrics, but at the same time there was a kind of undercurrent of melody and pop.
Yeah.
There was kind of like, and I loved that kind of mad kind of friction. I loved the tension of it, and I loved the fact that there was a naivety to it, even though they weren't naive. They're really good musicians and played for a long, long time. There's a real genuine simplicity and naivety to it. And we used to follow them around. Me and Paul used to just follow the Fall around. We used to get on the guest list because we kind of knew him, knew Mark Riley. I went to college with Paul Hanley, who was the drummer at that time. So we used to get on the guest list. So as long as we could get to wherever they were playing, we could get in. So we used to jib it on the train. Paul and I used to sneak on the train because we had no money, and then go and see them wherever they were playing, basically. And I think that was a big part of, I suppose, because I was like a sponge back in those days, because I'd only just got into music, so I didn't have a prehistory to do with music before it. So once I reached that point, it was just kind of like, bring it on. And I think that there's some, I don't know, I suppose even like now there's some of those basic principles of the fall, again, the simplicity, the originality, the bloody mindedness. I think you have to be bloody minded.
Yeah.
I think that's a really important quality, because that kind of protects you from the pressures to some degree.
There was a Live at the Witch Trials. That was around?
Yeah.
That period.
Yeah. I mean, some fantastic albums, and they did an amazing live album they did that just used to play to death on vinyl. I mean, it was just, and again, just the things like Fiery Jack. I mean, wonderful, brilliant. Again, like mad pop music.
Yeah.
Just Rouse Rumble and Totally Wired. Just again, kind of weird pop in a parallel universe. There'd have been a pop group, but in ours they just weren't. Great, real spiky and odd. And Joy Division, again, just original, just something, but you go, I've never heard anything like that. And again, just something really, really moving. I loved New Order as well. I kind of loved, what they morphed into.
You were saying about going to a Joy Division gig where Ian Curtis was a little bit sort of maybe not in the best of health, and it was... Yeah.
It was one of the first gigs I'd been to, and it was at the Russell Club in Hume in Manchester. And I guess I'd be 15, maybe 16, and they'd played a gig the night before, and I think they'd had to cancel because Ian wasn't well, and people were saying various things about him having an epileptic fit or something. So there's this kind of awe, this kind of hush in the place, because we weren't sure if they'd come out or not. We weren't sure whether they'd play. So everyone was kind of stood around, and it felt really odd. It was a really, really strange mood. And then they came on, and it was almost like the crowd were being almost sympathetic to it. Almost like everyone was almost in slightly hushed tones as they played, and it was an odd experience. It really was odd. Powerful. I mean, and obviously, he was going through a lot of issues and everything that obviously were being reflected to some degree. But moving, and even now, I suppose, after all these years, it's a bit like a time machine, isn't it? These things, gigs or songs pull you back to. I was speaking to somebody yesterday about this, how listening to a song sometimes it is almost like you've kind of wormholed it back to where you first heard it, and it kind of takes you back to a time in your past, and it's like, wow, yeah, I remember that, and also it triggers with those emotions and feelings again. Yeah, interesting.
It was definitely an era. I can remember having Up Here with the Bunny Men, Closer, and people either really loved it or a lot of the time were just totally confused by it. It was not your standard sort of top of the pops sort of Pan's People type.
No, I think you're right. I think even then it was kind of underground, and also there wasn't, now things get jumped on much more quickly. Music gets jumped on much more quickly. I mean, then especially if you weren't in London, if you just kept your head down, you'd be left alone for years. It wasn't like, people were lazy. The industry was lazy, I think, at that point. And you didn't have social media kind of forcing these things or making life easier. You had to basically get on a train and come to Manchester to watch some bands. So you got left alone. So you got to develop, your character and your sound, and also build up a repertoire of songs and sort the relationships out to some degree before you then bumped into the industry.
Yeah. And
I don't think it's the same anymore. I don't think bands have that luxury anymore. And I don't know, that sounds difficult. I mean, as I was saying before, when we first started, we were really wary of the business, really wary. Scared of it, scared of the business, scared of the media, worried about how it would impact on us and impact on what we were doing. And we felt quite delicate as a little ensemble. We felt quite delicate, and we just didn't want the big wide world coming in. Our first forays into the business were basically just to get gigs, because we couldn't get enough gigs. So we went to factory, and that was like, okay, well, initially you needed a demo, and after that it was you need a record. It's the only reason we went to Factory was to get a record, so that we could do gigs. It wasn't like, oh, like, great, we'll do, you know, bang a single out and off we go into, you know, superstardom. It wasn't at all. It was like, no, we're learning our craft. Part of learning our craft is doing gigs, and we need to do shows, and we can't do them unless we have something on vinyl, unless we have a record. And it's the only reason we approached Factory. We just said, let's do a record with you. And it was Rob Gretton that kind of came down and watched us. Alan Erasmus did a little bit. But it was Rob Gretton, the manager of New Order, but also one of the partners in Factory. And he liked it. We weren't a Factory type band, you know, we weren't cool and weird and mysterious. We were odd, difficult, quirky bunch of whatevers. But he got it and he loved it. And we played the Gallery in Manchester, and him and Alan Erasmus and Tony Wilson came down, the two watchers, and they were like, yeah, great, yeah, we want to do an album with you. We were like, no, we don't do an album with you, no. Because we were just like terrified, we were scared of Factory, which is, on reflection, was the most ridiculous thing in the world. We thought they were like big bad record companies, which they were so far removed from that, honestly. And it pains me to this day that we didn't do an album with Factory. To this day, it pains me, because we did 2 singles.
Him from a Village?
Him from a Village. Yeah, Watch the World initially. So it was Watch the World and Fires to Close and Folklore.
Yeah.
On those. And then it was Him from a Village and Things Were Perfect, which then became the Village Fire EP together. So it's 5 tracks, basically. And that was it. And then we went off and did sign for the big bad record company. It was like, we went from really good people we could absolutely trust, that we should have stayed with, and signed for a major record label that went horribly
Sire Records.
Sire Records.
I know from talking to Tim, he still sort of wakes up his sleepless nights with the experience of Sire Records.
Yeah, we made a big mistake there. I mean, the problem is that Sire was owned by Seymour Stein, who was a music fan, but everything went through Seymour. It wasn't like, oh, here's a bunch of A&R people and various directors that you can deal with. It wasn't. It was the guy that owned the company. For us, that was really impressive. He saw it, came to WOMAD from the States, flew in and really liked us and wanted to sign us. You know, and he'd signed Talking Heads and the Ramones and Madonna, and we had a good record, having good ears. And we thought, brilliant, wonderful, you know. And it was just bad. He was an art collector. Literally an art collector, and I think we were one of his pieces of art. And once he'd collected us, that was it. He hung us on the wall and left us. And we stupidly signed a 2-firm album deal with him, which is unusual. Normally there's an option. But with us, we had to do 2 albums with him, whether we liked it, whether he liked it. It was a 2-firm album deal. And we were stuck with him for, I don't know, probably 4 years until we'd done those albums and managed to get out the other side. And we just disappeared. Completely and utterly disappeared. He had no interest in doing anything with the things we'd done. It was just soul destroying, because at that point we were kind of, you know, on a small James type scale, kind of, so it was like, and just disappeared. It disappeared. And that was difficult. That was a really tough time. But, you know, I mean, we always knew we were in it for the long haul. It wasn't like, you know, and but also we weren't seeking the trappings. We weren't seeking the success and the glory. It was about the music, about learning what we were doing, getting better at what we were doing, finding our path musically through what we were doing, and then to some degree hoping that other people would like what we were doing, and that'd be your career, you know. And if they didn't, then you'd have it basically. But, oh well, we love it, no one else does. But just hoping that it would connect with people, and you know. But yeah, so those 2 albums were difficult. It's a difficult time.
And is it true that the deal just lapsed and then you were able to move on and do the...
Yeah, it was. There was a period where he could have taken up further options. I don't think he would have done. I mean, we view that now as a kind of a moment where we just managed to keep our heads down, and then we said, because there was a period where he had to notify us whether they were going to do more options. And he didn't, so we just kind of went, it's too late, we're off. I can't see any reason rationally why he would have done more albums with us, but I don't know why he did the first 2 anyway, to be honest with you. That doesn't make a great deal of sense. but yeah, we made a run for it basically. Then we did live album, One Man Clapping, which was again more really just to kind of keep things going, get things going, try and get some momentum going, but based on things we could do, as opposed to depending on a record company or try to find a deal or something. So we did that, and then we started at the same time writing and recording Gold Mother, the songs for Gold Mother and the album Gold Mother, which was being funded by Rough Trade at that time, who we'd done the distribution deal through One Man Clapping with and all the rest of it. So Jeff Travis, who owned Rough Trade, big fan of the band and lovely man. He was kind of funding it on a very kind of low scale, kind of low key way. And then Universal arrived and wanted to sign us, and they kind of bought the album, bought Gold Mother off Jeff, and that was it really. We did all the next 8 albums on Universal. Probably we're the only band that's ever done all their 8 options for Universal.
Wow!
I know it's a bit mad. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but. Yeah, we saw out all 8 possible options on Universal, which I think is quite impressive.
So rewinding back, when did you first meet Tim? And what were your first impressions? Because from my understanding, which I could be completely wrong, but I kind of got Tim's version. Were fairly different worlds.
Yeah, completely, yeah. I mean, Paul Gilbert's the guitar player in the band, and Paul was kind of the driving force early on in the band. He was very, very kind of pushy and determined and very, very outward going, and like if we needed to kind of get a gig anywhere, he'd be the person going in and like chasing club owners or whoever's to try and get us gigs, and he was my best friend. Yeah, so we used to kind of go out together, and we were in the university cellar bar, Manchester University, and we'd kind of managed to blag our way. You could get people to sign you in, you just kept asking people as they were coming in, would they sign you in? And sooner or later, one of the students very kindly sign you in, so you could get in the bar for nothing. And then whatever pennies we'd got, we'd kind of spend on cheap, subsidised university alcohol, which is great. And then we would when we'd run out of money, we'd nick people's drinks. There'd be a table full of drinks, you'd kind of nobody looking or anything, you'd pick one up and walk off with it, I know I'm not proud of it, but we did it. And we did it to Tim, and he kind of stood up to us and we were like, there was 3 of us there, so he kind of, it's very sensitive, he backed down at that point, but we just got talking to him, and he was at the university, and we thought, because lyrics was always a problem for us, we never had any real interest in lyrics in the band, so we just said, great, he goes to university, he can help us with lyrics, like as if anybody at university must be able to write lyrics. But maybe we knew something at that point, I don't know. So that was it. So we wrote, I think it was like an address on his hand, the address of the Scout Hut in Withington on the back of his hand, where we were rehearsing the next day, Withington Scout Hut. And he woke up the next day with this scribble on the back of his hand, and kind of all the memories started coming back. And he turned up. He just came to the rehearsal. And I think we were probably like, it's that weird bloke we bumped into yesterday. And that was it. He kind of came in and he helped out doing bits of backing singing and shaking the odd tambourine and trying to help with lyrics a little bit. But I mean, again, it was like there was no like real big decisions. It wasn't like, you're joining this thing. We were kind of just, we were doing our best to be a band and to do things, but it was all very fluid, really. And then that was it. That was the start of it. And kind of things just changed over the years. And me and him have kind of been ever present since that point.
So what was the point where you go, you're our singer? I mean, was he enthusiastic for it, or?
I think. Well, I don't know. I mean, I think there was just a point, I think, where we kind of went. It just more kind of morphed into it. I don't think there was any real point where you kind of went, all right, that's it now, you've got the job. It was more just his job, his role developed as time went on, and I think he got more confident and he got better at it, and his singing got better, and I think he decided he wanted to do it. I think he kind of from obviously getting the address scribbled on the back of your hand, that opened up a door of what might this be. But at that point, I don't think he was necessarily, oh, I'm going to be a singer in a band. I think it was more just like, should I go down to their rehearsal?
Yeah.
And it somehow madly worked. There's lots of crossovers in musical taste, the bands he liked, the bands we liked. It was all, they weren't a million miles apart. Lots of overlap. So even though kind of our backgrounds are very different, musically it was very, very similar. And we didn't talk a lot in those days. Communication wasn't a big thing for us. It was just get in a room and play. I mean, we'd rehearse for 6 hours a day.
Wow.
And not even record anything, just play. It's almost like you needed to get from A to B, and what happened in the middle was like part of your development, And we just used to play and bang and bang and bang. And sometimes we'd record stuff and we'd try and form them into songs. But a lot of the time, you kind of just knew it was for there and then.
Yeah.
And it was just part and parcel of learning what you were doing and progressing through a point, and just exploring really. Great fun, and we did like tons of that. Tons of it, like pointless rehearsals. It was brilliant. Gavin's kitchen. Gavin was the drummer, amazing drummer as well, and he had a very different kind of musical background to us. Gavin was into like rock and jazz, like his Buddy Rich, and he was and like John Bonham and like the big rock drummers and everything. So he wasn't an indie drummer, and he was an amazing drummer, but very, very different style to us. But again, it somehow worked for the period that he was with us in the early days. It really, really worked. It's very, very dynamic, very, very exciting. And it just and we just played. Just got in a room and made a bloody racket. And I'm sure it was a racket most of the time. We'd try and form things into songs. Especially if we had a gig, we would be like, oh God, we've got a gig, right? And suddenly be like, oh, we'll play those other ones that we did at the other one. What else now? What about this one? And you'd feel the pressure to form bits and pieces into proper songs you could play in the gig. And it was very, I suppose then you'd start communicating to some degree. But it was, we didn't talk about what we were trying to do. We didn't talk about how we wanted the songs to sound. We didn't talk about how we were going to be perceived. Like none of that. It was just it's just the bare bones of getting a song together, and then other than that, just playing.
Yeah.
It was probably not a bad thing at that stage, to be honest with you. I think sat there thinking it all through would have probably been fairly disastrous. Really, coming up with the master plan would have probably been ridiculous and probably quite damaging, I'd probably imagine.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, we talked a bit about like the myth that people have of music, and then the reality of what it's like. So, what are some of the biggest myths that have been exploded either through going through this? I mean, four decades of playing. That you. What are some of the biggest myths that commonly come up that people have?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose, the last thing the world would ever do is remotely paint the picture of my life and my job has ever been bad, any aspect of it. Because I think we're just about one of the luckiest people on the planet. I mean, I've done what I've absolutely loved for the last 40 years, so it's incredible. But you're away from home a lot. You're away from your family a lot. It puts a lot of stress on relationships. It puts a lot of stress on your relationships with your kids. It puts a lot of stress on just you basically keeping your act together. The industry as a whole has a terrible attitude towards mental health. There isn't mental health problems in the music business. You're available 24 hours a day. Everybody is, not just people in bands and musicians, but everybody in the industry. That's just the way it is. And they talk about mental health now, I've been doing for the last few years, but I don't see anything massively changing in the way that it's actually practically done to help people. The obvious issues of being in a band, you at some point you're going to have problems with alcohol. At some point you're going to have a problem with probably abuse, or the people around you do. Because those things are just considered the norm. They're considered acceptable. I turn up to work and there's a table full of free alcohol there. There is. That's just every time I go to a gig from 3 o'clock in the afternoon, there's a table full of free alcohol. It's like what other, unless you're a wine taster, what other job do you turn up for where there's a table full of free food?
I don't think you drink it when you're a wine taster.
You don't spit it out, don't you? So it's like, it's just like the kind of cliched ideas that are very damaging. That's almost like, yeah, but he's going to have a breakdown because everyone has a breakdown in band. Brilliant, yeah, he's going to like end up in prison. It's brilliant, isn't it? Yeah, great, yeah. No, it's not. It's bad, you know. And it seems to be kind of cool, or certainly accepted part of the normal kind of what comes with the job, really, and that's not right. It doesn't need to be like that.
Yeah.
You're creative, like an author, you know, like you don't see authors. Well, you do see authors going off the rails, but there's that culture of it in rock and roll, which I think is really damaging and needs to be kind of outdated, I think. Travelling's a pain in the backside. A number of man hours I spent in sodding airports, and being away from home a lot is the main killer, I suppose. Shattering illusions. I suppose the thing is, what is it you're aiming for in the industry? What are you aiming to do? And it seems like now there's a huge big section of the population that kind of are aiming to get into music because it basically makes you famous, and you know, or makes you famous, full stop, probably.
Yeah.
And it's a creative art. It's like being a painter or a writer. You're creating something. That's what's important. It really, really genuinely is. And I think, like, if someone said to me, like, oh, what would you say to an aspiring musician and it's like, you're going to struggle to make a living out of this.
Yeah.
Seriously, even if you're good, you're going to struggle to make a living out of this. Even if at some point you get appreciated and the world thinks you're a genius, you'll probably be dead for 20 years. It's hard. It's hard. You can't do it for those reasons. You can't do it, oh, I'll, get good and then I'll make loads of cash. You've got to do it because you love it, because it's your passion. And anything else that comes because of that is some mad, ridiculous bonus, accidental bonus. You know? You have to focus on the important aspect of this, and that's not fame. Of course it isn't. It's the quality of the art that you're creating, putting yourself into it. It takes courage. You're putting your balls on the line inherently. You know, it's like the sensitive part of you, which is painfully exposed at that point. It's like, this is who I am, and that's a risk. It's a risk.
Yeah.
And I think nowadays there is just this, and I think it's really easy with social media. It's a double-edged sword, social media, but one of the harmful aspects, really, I think, when it comes to music is that you end up concentrating so much on presenting yourself, having to present yourself as a persona, which is just constantly being fed by you. You're an artist, you're constantly on Instagram, or you're on TikTok, or you're on Twitter, and it's like, you should be making music.
Yeah.
That's another thing. And it will change. I think the industry will shift around, and this won't be something that we're bolted into forever. This will morph into something, and I hope it morphs into something that's a bit more kind of creative friendly, really.
I was going to say, and we talked about this before, about the advent of, back in when I was growing up, there's records. There was not even any cassettes. So
sure, yeah.
If you want to listen to the music, it's on the radio, or it's a bit of plastic you go down, you listen to, you take it home, you look after it. Then, of course, there's like cassette mediums. Now, how has streaming, Spotify, all those services affected the overall dynamic, and what's the goods or the bads from it, would you say?
Yeah, I mean, I still think it's changing. I think it's really easy for the industry to think that, like, oh yeah, we've got this model now, which is inherently, the DSPs, digital service providers, Spotify's, etc. And it isn't. That is going to change still. I don't know what's going to come next. I don't know how it's going to change, but you can feel it's going to change. Certainly from looking at it from my perspective, you can see that it's not working.
In what way did you say?
I think it's because it's not rewarding enough for the songwriters.
Yeah.
And the reason was because the record companies bought into it when they were collapsing. They tried to stop streaming. They made the huge mistake the record companies doing of not embracing streaming or downloads inherently initially. Downloads with Napster and taking 13-year-old kids to court and stuff. It was comical. And they didn't embrace it. They tried to stop it. They tried to put the finger in the dam, and it wasn't going to work. So then you had iTunes, which is Apple, which is a computer company,
Yes.
who took over instead. Ridiculous for them to have stepped into that. But the record companies were desperate. All the offices were closing, everyone was getting laid off. They didn't know what to do. So what do? They out of desperation, they signed bad deals with Spotify and YouTube, and what we're seeing now is music writers are suffering the consequences of those deals. Ton of cash being made, but the writers are suffering the consequences of that. It's changing a bit. There's a lot of pressure to change it within the industry to make it more fair. You keep hearing these things being said, and there's a big court case somewhere here, and it's changing slightly in America, but somebody's appealing it, and these things take years to kind of grind forward. At each point, the scene changes anyway, because things are changing relatively quickly all the time. Every time we release an album, what you need to do is different.
Yeah.
You can't have the strategy you had the last one, because doesn't exist anymore, and that exists. So it's changing, and I think the problem was, like, even with things like YouTube, like in the early days when things like that appeared, you can't just let it be what it wants to be, and then when they get so massive, start complaining, and they turn around and go, well, we're so big now, there's not a great deal you can do. These things should have been put in place early doors. The deals should have been put in place early doors. The fact that I could have music played on there, which they're selling advertising it around it, and they're going, oh, that's nothing to do with us, because we didn't post it. Yeah, but you're selling the advertising. Oh, still, we didn't post it. It's like ridiculous. It's ridiculous. It doesn't make any sense. So there are issues because it was the Wild West. Streaming, the internet, downloads, it was the Wild West. Everything was up in the air. The industry was dying. Everyone was trying to grab a piece of where things might go next, and things got messed up. But we're still suffering the consequences of that, I think. So I think it will change. I think things will get fairer. But it's going to take a while. It's going to take a while to do that. I don't know how things will practically morph. You look at Spotify and think, okay, they've got such a big slice of the marketplace. How's that going to work out as time goes by? I think it will change. I think people's relationship with streaming music will change. I mean, I think there'll be a lot more kind of direct customer connections with bands. So you'll probably come to James to stream your music rather than you'll go to Spotify. Like, why have you got this third party in the way, really?
62,000 tracks a day uploaded. I know,
exactly. Yeah.
Just bewildering.
It is, and you're at the mercy of playlists, and if you take a reduced rate, you can get put on more playlists and stuff. It's kind of like payola, really. It's pretty scammy. They have these pretend writers that don't exist, that make music which are then released so that Spotify get all the royalties, and they're just not real artists. When you've got that kind of monopoly, you can kind of piddle about to your heart's content, really. So I think it will change. I don't know exactly in what way, but I think the direct to customer link, because that's the kind of, as an artist, that's the strongest, and it's massively strong, kind of slice of the industry you have, which is your direct connection with somebody who absolutely loves you. There couldn't be more brand loyalty. Maybe a football fan, but football fans and music fans, regardless of what you do, they'll be there still. They'll be buying the shirts, they'll be buying the tickets, streaming your music. That's an amazing thing. And to then go, well, I'm not going to deal with you. I'm going to deal with him, and he's going to deal with you. And we have to accept what he does, and you have to accept what he does. It's a bit like, really? Is that the way it needs to be? Is that the way it should be? So I think there'll be less fingers in the pies at some point. Don't know exactly how that's going to work, but I think that's the way it's going, and it feels like that. It feels like the industry's going, hang on a minute. I think there's a bit of that going on at the moment from artists.
And how did you first get involved with working with Brian Eno? Because that was also quite maverick as a musician and as a character. So how did that interaction first occur?
We wanted to work with Brian from early days. We loved the stuff he'd done, and every album, every band that you liked, the best album seemed to be done by Brian Eno. It was kind of like, I want to work with Eno. And each record that came up, we'd kind of ask somebody, and somebody'd kind of go, oh no, he's too busy, he's doing this, he's doing that, whatever. And it was before Laid came out, and Tim sent Brian a cassette, like his management company or something, a cassette with a little letter with some demos on the cassette. And of course we just think, oh, it's gone in a bin bag somewhere, you know what I mean? He's just like, of course it has, you know. And then a few weeks later, Tim gets a phone call, and the bloke goes, hello, this is Brian Eno. So I know, you know, my people will talk to your people, or none of that. Brian just rings him up. So Tim's like, no, it won't be, you know. All right, okay, Brian, you know. And as the conversation developed, Tim realised it was Brian Eno. And Brian had been given the cassette and he'd gone away on holiday. And during his holiday, he'd been listening to the songs and really, really loved the songs. So he was basically saying, yeah, he's interested. And so we were like, what? It's just ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. So we got him down to kind of rehearsals in Manchester, kind of pre-production-y stuff we were doing. And he loved the demos, and he kind of got stuck in and he committed to it. And he said, okay, well, let's go and make a record. And his thing was, we didn't have very long to do it. We had 6 weeks in the studio. And that was like to record everything and overdubs and mix it and everything. So it to come out, go in without an album, come out 6 weeks later with an album. That's it, everything. And he knew that wasn't very much time, Brian. So he decided they would do 2 albums instead. I love his logic. We'd do 2 albums instead. Because if we aimed for 2 albums, we'd definitely at least get 1 album done. So it was wonderful logic. And that was just absolutely brilliant.
So this was Leiden
Wawa. And we had the first... and there was other reasons which he didn't mention, which was basically by having the second album, he could keep us out of the way, which meant he could get more work done and again had more chance of finishing the record. So there's kind of distraction technique going on here. And Brian saw, because the way we write songs is through improvisation, Brian saw a quality in the jams that he really, really liked. So instead of them just being like stepping stones to being a song at some point, in their own right, he said they've really got something special. So he said, I think this should be if not all, certainly the core of what the second record is, should be these improvisations, but worked on. So we were like, oh, that sounds exciting. Yeah, brilliant, great. So he brought Marcus Strauss in, who's now like a massively successful producer in his own right and all sorts of stuff. But he put Marcus, who was then just an engineer, he put him in the second studio, which is at Real World, Peter Cable's studio, in Box, near Bath. I was going to say Bath, but no, near Bath, excuse me. And Marcus just had free rein to just basically do what he wanted. He had multi-tracks there if I was improvising. The jams were long. He could take out 2 or 3 minutes of wherever. He could, you know, put man effects on things, just have some fun, really. And he did. And that became Wow Wow, which was like 20-odd pieces of music, some very short, some more song-like. And that was the second record. But it did exactly what Brian wanted, which was kind of get us out of the way.
Yeah.
And we finished the proper album as well. We got everything done, basically. We got both records done within the time frame. And that was the start of a fairly long relationship with him. We did another 3 albums with him after that.
And what was the reaction to Wawa? Because I remember hearing it and thinking, whoa, this is a bit like, it reminds me of when Bowie brought out Low. It's like, what's going on here? This is not what you would normally expect.
Well, the thing was for us was always, it was like the flip side to Laid in a way. It was like it wasn't which got confusing because in America they released it as a second album later, and that really confused everybody because they thought it was like the next big James album, and it was never meant to be the next big James album. Yeah. It was meant to be the double album that came along with Laid, and certainly when you explain the process, it kind of makes sense why it is what it is. It was received really well, and I think from the people that took the time to go, okay, yeah, I get that, I get this, you know, and also a different audience for us. I think a lot of people kind of just, the songs of Laid, and also it's quite, Laid is quite an acoustic album in a lot of respects. Wow Wow's far from being acoustic, you know. So, and I think that as a flip's really, really nice, and it works really well. It also became like a springboard for us as a band to change because we loved a lot of the sounds on Wow Wow and the direction it was going. So the next album after that, Whiplash, had a lot more technology in it. You know, we were messing around with drum machines and samples, and we got much more electronic. You know, still keeping the real instruments on top of it, but having free reign to throw loads of anything at it. It's almost like we can be this or we can be this. You know, we can be acoustic, stripped down, you know, low-key, very musical songs of Laid, or you can be the abrasive, you know, kind of post-industrial stuff of some of the bits of Wah Wah. You know, that's what the band can be, and I loved that. And we've always kind of wanted that. We've always wanted, like, we're just going to do what we like and what we want, you know? And I was saying, man, about being bloody minded. Like, to be here for 40 years, you have to do that. Like, I don't want to find a genre and stay in the sodding genre for 40 years. I mean, it's soul destroying. Like, we had to have free reign. This is what we, in a way, kind of told the fans from day one. It's like, it's not going to be an easy ride. You're not going to get what you want. You know, there'll be hopefully some great bits, but there's probably going to be some bits you don't like, you know, just because for our own sanity, you know, you need to be able to have that kind of control over it.
Well, I know one of the artists that you supported, it might have been around this time, was Neil Young. Sure. And I remember talking to, when I interviewed Sylvie Simmons, and we talked about Tom Waits, Neil Young. She categorised all of them as the awkward bastards. The ones that exactly what you said, which is the bloody minded people that go, you know, right, we're going to do this. You know, the record company go, we'd just like you to do more of this because the kids love that. You know, they go, no, we're going to do, and they go, whoa, what's that? You've played alongside and supported a lot of artists, including the Neil Young. Who have been your favourite ones, and who have been the ones where you thought, I'm not sure what this is like?
I don't know about good ones. We've been massively blessed. I mean, playing obviously with Neil Young, that tour was ridiculous. I mean, we played with him a couple of times. We played with him with Booker T around Europe, a European tour, but the big one was the American tour for just before Harvest Moon album came out. She's like an acoustic. And
what album were you?
That was after Laid, I guess. And it was because his manager, because Neil was playing pretty much acoustic. He was going out on his own, no band, playing acoustic. And his manager heard it on the radio, playing acoustically. So they rang up, you know, his people rang our people and said, do you want to support Neil Young on an American tour, but you've got to play acoustically? And we were like, oh, amazing, yeah, of course we will. We didn't think initially, like, well, what does that mean? We were like, yes, of course we will, yeah, brilliant. And he did just play acoustically, but it was just like in a little radio. So it's like if, you know, me and Tim and, you know, Saul were here. Well, they weren't like, it wasn't a gig. It was just a few songs and, you know, down a couple of mics, you know. Anyway, so yeah, of course we agreed to do it. And it was this, he was playing all outdoor amphitheatres, apart from one which was in Vegas. All the rest of them were outdoor amphitheatres. Amazing places. Incredible outdoor arenas in the most stunningly beautiful places. The first one, which was the first gig we did, was Red Rocks, where U2 recorded live from Red Rocks. It was 30,000 people. So we've gone from like the spindly little couple of guys in a radio station to playing to 30,000 Neil Young fans. And they're not your typical James audience, let's face it. You know, these are like check-shirted truck drivers, you know. They were like, oh, they're going to hate us, it's going to be tough. And going out acoustically, you haven't got any big black boxes to hide in front of. You know, it's like, where's the volume gone? It's like, you just got like bass, I had acoustic bass, just plugged in, DI'd into a wedge. So there's nothing. Dave had a few drums, but he was stood up, you know, behind like a floor tom and bits and pieces. So all the big bank of nonsense that you normally have, gone. And the stage was huge. We took this tiny little square in the middle. It was like this. We were absolutely terrified. And they loved us. They absolutely loved us. Couldn't believe it. They were like hooping and hollering and just, they obviously didn't know anything we were doing, but they were just totally got it, totally appreciative. And it still is the best tour we've ever done. I think we were so well looked after by his people. His crew and everybody were just absolutely lovely, as was he. And then we'd play and we'd kind of come off and go, whew, and then we'd watch him play. And you'd like all the venues pretty much were like seats, but then they had like the grassy banks around the outside where people go with picnics and like, so we'd just go and sit on the grass as the sun's going down, like watching Neil Young play, and he'd just have like a line of guitars and his banjo and then a big old wooden pump organ that he was taking around with him. And he'd just tell a few stories and then he'd kind of wander around and pick up an instrument and just like bang a couple of chords and put it back down and then another one and then kick into a tune, you know. They're really, really chilled. And it was just the best. It was honestly just absolutely wonderful. So for my country mile, I think that was probably the best support we've ever had. I mean, we've had loads of amazing ones. Playing with Bowie at Main Road. I'm a big Man City fan, supporting Bowie at Main Road. Which playing Main Road. I always thought I'd be playing for City when I played at Main Road. But, but that was incredible.
Did you get to talk to Bowie at all?
No, I didn't, unfortunately. But I was born half a mile from Main Road. So that's my old stomping ground. And
you probably supported Springsteen, I think? Or we played at a festival with Springsteen?
Yeah, we did, yeah. We played at Maris Vivas in Portugal.
Right.
But The Cure, we've played with a few times, amazing. Absolutely love The Cure, incredible band live. And they play for hours, and it's amazing. Honestly, absolutely wonderful. Yeah, I mean, as in bands that have helped us. The Smiths took us on tour, Meet Us Murder tour, which was a huge tour for us. And they were lovely, incredibly nice. And they had to pay us. They were offered money to take bands on tour because it was like the tour of the year. And what ordinarily you'd do is you'd be bought on a tour like that by your record company, so you'd pay to be on it, and we didn't have any money to pay, and we had to be paid because otherwise we couldn't have done it. And they very kindly took us on tour and paid us money, and we travelled around in a caravanette, just sleeping in a caravanette, and we had like a 2-ring gas burner with 2 pressure cookers, and we'd have like brown rice in one and like all the veggies and lentils in the other, and we'd just feed ourselves. We did, and we'd sleep with all the gear in there as well, all the gear strapped down, and 4 beds, and we'd all sleep in the back and just drive around with this mad old caravan.
It's good you're not a 9. If you were a 9-piece now,
it wouldn't work.
It would be tricky.
It would. But yeah, amazing. We've had such a New Order. Took us on tour, helped us out a lot. The Fall gave us shows in the early days. We've been so graced by people, you know, helping us, and it's a Manchester thing, I think, as well. I'm sure other places as well, but certainly I've noticed it in Manchester. You try to do the same, you know, try to take bands and give them a helping hand, you know, and it's important. It's important to reciprocate that, to return that, and find help.
So here we are in 2022. If you could beam back to the days of 15, 16, if you had to communicate one core message for Back to the Future, what would be useful, or what would be useful to flag up? I
don't think I could have done, because I mean, the only thing I would have ever said to me back then really was just to hang on in there, because there's times that have been like really difficult on a personal level, on within the business, you know, within the band, relationships within the band. That's a massive one for people to get right. Really difficult. It's because when you are together in the band, you tend to be together 24 hours a day. So you don't just, you know, if there's problems, you don't get away from each other.
Yeah.
You know, you really, really don't. But I did stick it. So that's not really a message I need to pass on. I don't know how I did. I don't know how I'm still here. You know, personnel have come and gone, and I'm still doing this. Me and Tim have had a ridiculously long relationship together, and it's really good. We're getting on really, really, really well. We've had issues in the past, Tim. Massive issues between me and Tim. We split. The band split for 6 years. We went our separate ways, and we came back, and we had a real, like, it was a kind of an epiphany, I guess, really, just to kind of kick up the backside, where you kind of go, you're such a lucky pair of bastards, and you messed it up through being dickheads, really, just through being stupid and unappreciative of each other and of what you've got. And it's like, why would you do that? How would you do that? Like, the position of, you know, that we'd found ourselves in life, good fortune, whatever it might be, to then throw that away through something ridiculous as bickering and falling out. Childish. And we grew up during that period, we did, and we came back with incredibly different attitudes. We treat our relationship incredibly preciously. And we also know the whole thing's delicate. You can't think it's bulletproof, you know. You just got to look after it. And it's worked. Me and Tim get on really, really well now. Really well, and we're really close. Really appreciative of what we're doing. And, well, working on album 17, I think it is now. So.
Well, there's not many bands who can say played for 40 years, still selling out stadiums. You know, I think 25 million albums. I mean, if you went back to sort of like that first early days with Tim, and you go, I've seen the future. We'll have sold 25 million albums by 2022. It's quite something, really. You know.
Yeah, I mean it's been we've had. I mean it's been some bonkers bits and some difficult bits I have, but it's just been really lucky, incredibly lucky, and still am. Things I'm doing now, which are just absolutely amazing, and love it. I love the songwriting. I love getting in a room and jamming. It's just brilliant. We've got more coming up and so looking forward to it. It's because you go in a room with nothing and stuff appears and it keeps appearing. And I used to think, I don't know if I think this anymore, but I used to think one day we'll get in a room and there'll be nothing there. That'll be the end of the band. We'll go, oh, it's gone, hasn't it? Yeah, it's gone. Oh, well, never mind. I honestly used to think that. Because we don't go in with anything. So you're turning up going, right, let's go. And then nothing happens, and it's never happened. But I used to think that. I used to think, well, that'll be the end of the band.
Yeah.
We'll get in a room and there'll be nothing there anymore for a reason or for no reason. It'll just have gone. Touch wood. That's never happened. But I don't know. It just doesn't. It always seems to be there, but in its own right, it's great fun. Regardless of being, the stepping stones to ending up with songs and blah 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 blah. Just for doing it, it's brilliant. And there's loads of times where we're doing the jams, where you're going, this will never be a song. This bit we're doing now will never ever play a part in the song, but it's brilliant.
Yeah.
There's the bits when we hover, and it's usually where we're going from one section to another. So you're sitting a bit free, going, oh yeah, that was pretty good. Then you go, okay, we need to change. So you'll kind of sit in an area, and someone will be looking for an open door, and you'll just be listening and going, and it's brilliant. And you could never record it and play it to anyone because they wouldn't know what's going on, and they wouldn't know the 20 minutes before it. And you'll just be like, and this kind of little amorphous mass in the room, and someone's just looking for the next step, and then people follow. And it's brilliant, brilliant. I say it's in its own right, it's a wonderful thing, regardless of it being the stepping stones to ending up with songs. It's such a, and again, the people I play with, wonderful. Mark, the keyboard player, what a player. What a player. You can never hear what he's doing. That's the painful thing. Every musician I know is always 10 times louder than they deserve to be, me included. But Mark, you can never hear him. And you keep going, have you turned down again? And he's going, no. He goes, yes, you have. It's like the only musician I've ever come across who's constantly pulling his fader down. It's just, and he's a genius. Yeah. Absolute genius. A lot of the time you don't hear it until you listen back to stuff, because we record everything we play. As soon as we start making a noise, everything's recorded, multi-track. And you push up the faders and you go, it's brilliant, I didn't hear that in the room. And if you see me doing something, it's dead still, like this. But it's always plays amazing. So he's a funny guy. But lucky, to be honest, we're incredibly fortunate. The blessed existence I have.
Well, I thank you so much for sort of this discussion, because it's a window into a period which is just fascinating.
Sure.
If you're doing anything for 40 years and you still have massive international enthusiasm, and I know the James fans, right from when I first saw you, sort of from the Astoria in the UK, in Leeds, which was about 150 people, completely, totally loved the music.
Yeah.
So I think good on you.
Great, thank you. Appreciate it.